안녕하세요. 제 이름은 Cheon-Shik입니다. 나는 한국의 입양인입니다. 반갑습니다. Hey, my name is Cheon-Shik Yang, or my Western name is Jeff, and I am a Korean adoptee, and I make and wear Hanbok, the traditional clothing of Korea, every day. Now, what is Hanbok? Hanbok is the traditional dress of Korea. It encompasses all of garment existence, I guess, in Korean history. The term Hanbok did not really come into use until the late 19th, early 20th century when Western clothing was first introduced. So in a need to differentiate between Western clothing and Korean clothing, the term Hanbok was brought into use. There are absolutely amazing, wonderful, inspiring designers, mostly in Seoul, but there are many Korean companies here in the United States that are designing modernized versions of Hanbok, encouraging pride in our own culture and not just saving it for, one day a year or something, that we can clothe ourselves in what our people and ancestors have been wearing for proven century upon century, and that to have pride in that is not an unusual thing. Now, I wear Hanbok every day for probably a multitude of reasons. I, like I mentioned before, am a Korean adoptee, which means I was born in Korea and then I was adopted to a family in the United States. I am also a transracial adoptee, which means I was raised by a family who was not of Korean descent. I was raised by a white family in a predominantly white town, and gratefully and thankfully, growing up, even though Asian culture had yet to permeate like it does today, I had a loving group of other Korean adoptees. So even though as children we may not have had the emotional maturity to discuss identity and what it means to be an adoptee, I was lucky enough to have faces that looked like mine, to have friends that knew what it was like to know you're from somewhere else and that you're an adoptee, to have this unspoken bond. Now, like I said, with small white towns and not getting much culture, I grew up in a time where the internet was just slowly coming into its own. So beyond what little books in English in the local library I had, Korean culture had no visibility in my life. It wasn't until moving to New York City and really diving headfirst into everything the city has to offer did I truly discover how much I needed to know more, how much I needed to find a community not only of adoptees, transracial adoptees, Korean Americans, Koreans from Korea, the wide range of those under the Asian American umbrella. That community is something I finally found and knew that, oh, this is everything I've needed. So the addiction began. Like many other adoptees, as we get older, the yearning to know more and connect more, we will usually do birth search, which I am currently beginning myself, but that combined with learning about Korean culture, for as much as we may have been presented with bits and pieces, it usually isn't until later that we truly feel appreciative of it, or, oh, I've been missing that. So things like making kimchi, or just making Korean food, eating Korean food, things that we know we would have had in a lifetime, in another life. But those obtaining bits and pieces back are things that I have been accomplishing and wanting more of, learning Korean, Hangul, the Korean language, slowly but surely, gaining those skills back, making new memories of Korean culture and discovering things for myself has brought me to the point where I am today. I believe it was a few years ago, let's just say, I bought a vintage Hanbok for my birthday. Now in Korea, traditionally, or in Korean families, as a baby, you would get dressed up in a little baby Hanbok for your first 100 days, what they call a dol, and you'd be dressed up, and it's filled with traditions and activities. But there would be instances in which you would be dressed in Hanbok or asked to wear Hanbok that I felt I really, really, really wanted. So, blessed by the gods of eBay, I got my first 5-piece set. So, baji pants, Jeogori top, joki vest, a little short jacket called a magoja, and then a longer outer coat called a durumagi. And that first trying on, I instantly felt a difference. Not only as an adoptee, but wearing clothing that speaks to you in terms of your ancestry and heritage can have such a grounding feeling, and is for adoptees often searching for that feeling so much, to feel that almost hug from your ancestors is such an amazing thing. So, needless to say, I was hooked. Growing up, I've always been a crafty person, so with like fast fashion, nothing ever had one life with me. It would then be dyed after I was over with whatever color it initially was. You dye it or put beading in it, cut it up, embroider. So I had a little bit of sewing knowledge, nothing as I can do now, but little bits like buttons, could sew a running stitch up in a straight seam, make pillowcases, that kind of thing. But blessedly, I stumbled across the costume, historical costuming, historical dress community in YouTube and thus Instagram. And not only just gobbling down all the information and technique that has been so amazingly put online for us to consume, but striking the match to have everything and anything I can know about Hanbok. Unfortunately, very limited in English language, but everything I could to find more, learn about pattern, learning about history, what kind of stitch they would use, what kind of fabric, where did that fabric come from, what influences that style, what in that period of history influenced that style of dress. Much as we have an expansive knowledge of European clothing, I wanted to know in Korean history and Korean dress that extent of knowledge. Like many in the vintage community, historical dress, everyday, differently dressed community will say, this does not happen overnight. Like I said, I began with a vintage set. and I would, wear silk baji pants with like a dress shirt, or throw the long silk overcoat duromagi with jeans and a tank top or something. And slowly buying modern pieces from new designers, or hunting on that eBay for vintage pieces. I would slowly accumulate, and from those pieces I was able to draft patterns, and through much trial and error was able to solidify my theories on what pattern pieces were, later to be found, thankfully, pretty accurate by what books I could obtain. But slowly but surely I would branch into making my own pants, making my own tops, and then through really breaking down every bit of information I can find on the internet in Korean, in English, and any languages presented, to making the full Hanbok wardrobe I have today. Now today I range from 130% full hat, the headband called a mangun. My hair is always up in a top knot called a sangtu. I layer as traditionally adequate. I admit I am as far from historically accurate. I am historically adequate, or appropriate, or inspired at best. But the basic teachings of, natural fiber undergarments to protect the beautiful silks on the outside, that idea and process I have taken to heart in wearing traditional wear daily. Maybe once a month, once every 2 months or so, I may venture out without a hat, but usually I am in full Joseon period, nobleman, full fantasticness every day, taking the train, anywhere I need to go, walking around the city, getting my Starbucks, going to the grocery store. If I dare step into a fast fashion store now to look around, it is certainly an experience, but I live my life fully prideful and loving everything about who I am and where I come from, and the culture and people that I come from, and what we have been able to create through centuries of talent and inspiration and technique. And I am proud to continue that on in the modern age. So thank you guys for bearing with my first shaky little baby steps into the historical costuming dress community here on YouTube. I'm not really sure exactly what kind of videos I'll be doing yet. Probably some garment construction, as is common. Maybe get ready with me's, probably touching upon Korean history, Korean culture, Korean adoptee themes, issues. Not really too sure right now, but stay tuned and I will keep everyone posted. Can't believe I'm going to be saying this. If you're interested in seeing more on Hanbok or Korean culture and whatnot, please ring the little subscribe bell in the corner and join me on my Hanbok adventures. So thank you so much, guys, and hope to see y'all soon. 안녕.